versus blind here.
One more time.
As some of the RFID cards get a little sticky
And I
for
think we
dealers
also
to deal with.
had the issue with the felts being very slick, so it
Oh,
doesn't
so
grab.
bad combination.
Because when I was watching the first live stream, I was just at home watching it, and I was like, oh my goodness, I thought they said we're getting the best dealers at the win. What?
Hey, this is a breakdown hand, right? I mean, this is a channel about, cool poker hands.
Nothing has happened yet, but probably something will happen soon.
Yeah,
because
you would expect, or you just got to be balanced, and we're bluffing you guys, but that's probably not the case.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell you, even as the person who's potentially bluffing. Let's talk about the lack of action though, and if there's anything there, because on this very, very dry flop, you would think Steven Song might have a fair amount of bets here. He should have a slightly stronger range than Alon in this spot, having limped pre-flop versus just checking, right?
100%. He very well can have a bunch of aces, maybe even good aces. He can have aces up. He might be able to have sets here. Alon basically just doesn't have any of those kinds of hands.
You got a 3-5, sure, but
okay.
not those types of hands too often. So with the range advantage, and I know Queen High is good a lot of the time, but like there's a lot of random cards that can come and beat you. It feels like a one blind bet is just printing money for free equity denial, and like if you lose a blind, so be it. It's probably really worth a blind bet. So I know Steven is a good player. He must have gamed this out many times in his head and been in this scenario many times, and Queen 8 just happens to fall in the checking range with just enough showdown value, I guess.
It's also possible that based on the way their hands have been going lately, he thinks he shouldn't. Maybe he's been shown to be bluffing a lot lately or caught a bunch of times and just feels like his images and such that he wants to be taking lots of stabs right now.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. The math is really on your side here, right? You're getting 3-1 on your bluff, immediate odds.
Right.
You surely are getting folds more than 25% of the time, which means you're making money instantly.
Yeah.
Forgetting about winning the pot later on later streets, even when called, which of course you're going to do some of the time too.
Yep. Alon's check back is a little bit less surprising to me.
Yeah.
Just because, as we said, Steven has a stronger range, and he could just be a little trappy here too with that stronger range. And you'd be a little concerned about that if you're Alon, right? And you have nothing going on the board. You do have Queen High, which can be good sometimes, although not as often as Steven's Queen High is good because, Steven's already checked.
Right.
I think it's fine to check back, though.
I think it's fine, too. Like, also, you don't have to try and win every pot every time, right? And this is a smaller pot, at least. But, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's good to win.
It goes check again on the turn.
That's also a little surprising, at least, right?
At least a little. I mean,
they just both think Queen High is good enough, I guess.
A club draw comes in, so maybe they're both fearful that a club draw is not going to go anywhere, perhaps. I mean, some more straight draws come in.
I mean, Steven has the 8 of clubs, which blocks some of that stuff a little bit.
It actually blocks all of that stuff.
Yeah, so he could take some shots.
I guess it's still just good enough showdown value. That's just
barely.
But it still feels like one blind bet from Steven is just printing money here, right?
It's always weird when you've got showdown value, but it's hard to get to showdown, and you can never call a bet.
Right.
And these are hands that really can't call bets.
Right. Right. And Alon checks back again. I mean, at this point, I would expect Alon to bet now. This is a bit more surprising than his flop check to me.
I would expect him to bet a fair amount now as well. But I guess maybe he thinks, though, that like Steven's either going to have bluffed or have a hand that can call a little too often, and it's actually not worth it. Like the check is sort of the hardest thing to get him to fold.
Right. He's got at least king high most of the time you would expect, and he's not checking it to fold. Right. So that is the fear.
And if he has a deuce or a 4 or something like that, he's probably calling. So why try?
Right.
I get that.
Action will come. I promise.
There's going to be craziness somehow on the river.
If you want action, you want nitro betting, baby. Use the link in our pinned tweet. Yeah, I say baby during the ads and only during the ads because I'm really jazzed up about it. It's got poker, it's got casino games, it's got sports betting, it's nitro betting. Say something, Jonathan.
Yep.
You got to use the link in the pinned tweet to get all of the cool promotions. We'll see you there.
Yep.
And then the next day I talked to one and they were like, oh my God, I got to show you this. And I was like, I feel really bad. But then, so then every time I talk to a new dealer, I would like tell them like, okay, this is going to happen. It's going to be fumbled sometimes.
Don't worry about it. And these are indeed the best dealers in the world. I'm lucky to have them here.
Folding was fun too. It was like air hockey.
Oh, really? At the table? Nice.
Steven cooking up a plan here.
Perhaps does have an 8 in his hand. It's very rare that he immediately gives up, always thinking through all the possibilities. I'm going to go to work here with a check raised to 8 million.
Steven, just a really tough opponent, just like reluctant to let anything go, any spot. He doesn't let it pass him by. It's hard to make a battle of middling queens exciting on this board, but they found a way.
They did indeed. Well, I'm going to let Steven feel the heat for a little bit.
This is the kind of thing I don't think any action is going to happen right now, but it's the type of thing that when an opponent does this, it makes it really hard to bluff them later. Honestly, when they get this like sticky and they just, it's hard. Like when someone just turbo mucks their hands, I feel like it's like, okay, cool.
Easier.
They believe me and I could probably do this again. Wow.
Alon senses that something's up here. Still, it's just queen high.
Pretty sure Steven would be, Steven does not think that Alon's hand is this bad when he's thinking this long. He's like, okay, I guess I'm trying to get this guy to fold a pair. He's got fours or something, and I have to like hope that he finds the fold. But wow, queen 9 offsuit is what is in the tank right now. Wow. Oh my God. Holy, what?
Makes the call with the better queen high.
I told you it was a breakdown hand.
Yeah.
He called me with a queen and a 9, honey. But this wasn't pre-flop out of the big blind. This was a check raise on the river.
This is really a wild, wild call. And the first thing I wonder is, can it possibly be good? I mean, there's obviously other things to talk about even leading up to this call, but holy moly.
We will get to that, but let's go chronological because as humans, it's a crutch of ours. We always have to go chronologically. It is. So Steven checks again. He's just, at this point, it seems, praying that it goes check, check, and somehow queen 8 is good, which fewer and fewer hands are available that queen 8 is good against, but it's still possible, right?
Yeah.
Alon is concerned, it seems, that queen 9 is not good enough when Steven checks 3 times. It just feels like a showdown value hand. You would think a jack high type hand would have bet by now most of the time.
There's a problem. I agree with that. The problem, of course, is he bets 2 million, which is 2.5 blinds here. And I just am concerned that we're not going to get enough of the range that's beating us to fold. Like, I think a 4 is probably calling. A deuce is probably calling.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can fold out king highs, but I'm afraid of too many of the 4s and the deuces of the world are going to call that. I just don't know that this is a good enough bet.
I'm not entirely sure we're going to fold out king highs from a pro who checks 3 times.
Maybe you're right.
Like, why would he have not bet king high on the flop if, the showdown value is probably good enough to call with king high on the river for 1 bet.
This doesn't mean to say you can't bluff here, but we both decided this in the podcast after talking about it a bit, that a much bigger sizing is going to be much more effective. Like, what if instead of betting 2 million, he bets 4 million?
I think that's a much better plan. Like, we have to at least fold out some of the king highs that way.
Oh my god! And
Yeah.
some of the king highs, probably a bunch of the deuces and the fours are just going to feel obligated to fold now too. It's just so much more. It's 5 blinds. Like it's an actual amount of money.
Yep.
Or chips, tournament units.
Yeah, tournament units.
Whatever.
Yeah, $2 million.
And this also really is going to eat into Steven's stack now too, right?
Yeah.
Like Steven doesn't start the hand with that many blinds.
Right, 4 million. I think I agree is a better size, but Alon goes 2 million, and,
Okay.
and that sets off the raise heard round the world. All right,
Nice.
so why is Steven raising? Is it a good story, and should he have done it?
So Steven is raising because he thinks he's mostly up against a 6.
Yep.
Right? He thinks that if somebody had 5-8, and in this case it would be Alon having 5-8, almost always that's a bet on the turn, right?
Yeah, it's double gutted on the turn.
It's like it checks again. You're just going to bet that almost always. And by the way, Steven, as we noted before, has an 8 in his hand, which blocks the nuts. These are all really good reasons to raise. Now, you asked another question, which is it a good story? And the answer is, not so much.
Not amazing.
Not a
You're like
great
just really
story.
praying for the bet on the river when you have a pretty good hand that you can raise.
What are we really repping? Are we repping a 5-8 that didn't bet the turn ourselves? I mean, are we really?
And didn't bet the river, by the way.
Yeah. Are we really repping a weird 2-pair that's now, check raising almost a pot-sized bet on the river?
When another straight comes in.
I mean, are we really? Maybe. But
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like we've got a lot there.
It's not a great story. So still, though, should he do it? Even though it's not a great story, sometimes you should do it anyway because it's just going to work, right?
I think this probably works a lot, and I actually like the play.
Yeah, I think even though the story is not great, he should do it.
Right. It's like Avatar.
It's exactly. As we see, obviously we were lying, and he shouldn't have done it because he got called by slightly the 1 pip better queen high.
The what happens to Steven Song's aorta when he sees the hand that calls him? I mean, it just must tighten up.
I'm not an aorta breakdown guy. I'm a hand of poker
Right.
breakdown guy. So
I'll
I
do
can't-
that in my other.
Yeah,
my
do
other
it
video.
on the other YouTube channel.
Yeah.
All right, can this possibly be good, even though he is right this time?
This
Can
call?
it possibly be good to make this call? I can see why he is drawn to the idea of putting more chips in the pot one way or the other because of all of the story stuff we were just talking about. Like if Steven had a nutted type hand, he might not be raising 2-pair hands or sets. He might only be raising straights here because Alon technically could have a straight, right?
You have to be so sure that Steven is never turning one of his showdownable hands into a bluff to be able to even consider this call. Like, if a deuce is ever thinking, oh, God, I'm losing to a 6, I better raise. Or if a king 5 or king 8 is doing this too, like, we're just going to call and lose.
Yeah, I think that is where Alon runs into a logical problem
Yeah.
because he stopped at the story doesn't make sense and didn't think some of the bluffs beat me.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think they do. And you came up with like a convoluted theory on the podcast of how Alon could justify calling with queen 9. I think it's that Steven would think that king high is good enough, so he wouldn't turn any king high into a bluff like king 8 or king 5. And all of his bluffs will contain either an 8 or a 5, and that means that it's a queen high or lower with an 8 or a 5, which is all worse than queen 9.
Assuming he's never turning a king high or 1-pair into a bluff. If we really feel we know that about him, well, actually, now we beat all the bluffs, and there's not, I mean, maybe.
And that also assumes that he has to have a 5 or an 8 to make a bluff, by the
Yes,
way.
it does.
Right?
It does.
So it's way too many things. And I think that this is
Agreed.
just reaching way too deep into the distribution to make the call. We have so many 6s in our range that we can call with if we just don't think the story's any good. We don't have to call with queen high. We could have king high. Like, that's better, although still would be a crazy call.
We should have a lot of 1-pair hands that also block some straights too, because any 1-pair hand with an 8, a 5, or even a 3 blocks some of the straights that could be making this play.
I think this is a bad call, even though it worked out this time.
I think so too.
And, ultimately, it didn't work out because Alon finished 4th out of the 4 remaining players, and Steven ended up turning that small stack into the win.
$700,000. Let's go.